We are back at the hickory tree. The owner has not been exactly compliant with some of the follow-up actions that he said he was going to do. We brought in some topsoil. It's in the dump truck located behind me. We're going to place that in this area and spread it out. We're able to mechanically dump around the edges of the critical root zone that's been established here so that we don't run any heavy equipment in on the critical root zone. I've always been fascinated at how people are so readily able to take a 42,000 pound bucket truck and take it up under a tree to prune it, and we don't necessarily think that's great. We also see that in this area we've got some dead wood that has fallen down, and that reinforces our recommendation that pruning will be necessary before construction of the greenhouses is completed and they're placed here. We are following up to the circle and the radial hub and spoke pattern that we put in around this tree. It was 6 months ago, and we encouraged the owner to place some topsoil, which we were able to put in the radial trenches. We were very fortunate in seeing that as you can see, this is nice and soft here. This is my penetrometer, and as you can see next to it, it's not. We've got twice as much down below here. That's where we decompacted with the air tool, and as you can see, we didn't do it right here, and we have half as much. We've only got a few inches, and so our actions that we took were on time. They were very much beneficial to the tree. We've got some dead wood falling in the critical root zone that you will see. These are branches this size that need to be eliminated. This supports the recommendation that before the greenhouses were constructed and placed here, that it should be pruned of dead wood and shaped up so that the risk of these branches falling and hitting his greenhouse would be eliminated or minimized. We can't eliminate it. All trees are dangerous. Always tell your customers that, because you can't completely safeguard the customers from damages from their trees. Extreme weather conditions can do it. Now, just as an example, in the last 6 months since we were here, there has been no rain, there's been no snow, no ice, and we are in a severe drought. Thankfully, we did what was necessary to sustain this tree and stabilize its condition. We are here to inspect the condition of the critical root zone. We recommended that there be topsoil applied, and for one reason or another, the owner could not bring those resource materials here. He asked us instead to haul them in, and we can see how necessary it is. This is my penetrometer, and as you can see, I don't have much penetration there. So each one of these segments is 3 inches, and I only got a couple of inches. But if I go over here to where we aerated and decompacted, I can go down 2. That's almost a full 6 inches of aeration. Here's another array right here that was done. We can go down, if I move out of the way of the root, I can go down almost 2 complete sections of my penetrometer. Before, that's a rock. I can go down that far. And as you can see, that's more than enough aeration in this critical root zone to stabilize its condition. It hasn't had enough water. It has a minimal amount of nutrition. As we can see, we've stabilized the condition in the collar. It's dried out. There was the cracking in this member right over here has dried up and stabilized. There's nothing in it that indicates that there is a problem associated with the anchors, and so we're still on point with a tree that is to be saved. it is a safe tree as long as it is maintained, and the owner has agreed for us to put some 3 or 4 inch layer of topsoil over this entire area, which is our next tree preservation action. As I said, we're back here in the critical root zone, and we're trying to establish the current condition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig in this spot right here, and I'm going to determine a couple of things. One is how much moisture. As you can see, we've started to build up some moisture, and we've got some of these fibrous roots which is come from the tree, and that's exactly what we want to see. Now, there's not a lot of them, and what we found consistently here on this site, I'll do a little bit more digging. Here's one right here. As you can see, I've got some roots, but they are within just a couple of 2 or 3 inches of the surface of the ground. And so before we can do any further aeration or incorporation of materials on this site, we're going to have to put some more topsoil down. If we don't put any more topsoil down, and you get in here with your air gun and you start stirring up and exposing these roots like you see here, you're going to do more harm than good, because we're in a severe drought. There's no water. The owner has not irrigated. The expense, the time, and the location of his water source is just not working out, and so we're going to have to enable the tree to absorb this water that flows down the hill for the times when it does rain, and if necessary, if the tree gets under stress, we will supply supplementary water by pumping it in ourselves. So this is what we're looking for. We've got some moisture, we've got some roots, but they're very close, and we must build up the surface before we can do any additional work in this critical root zone without further harming the tree. We are examining the root collar and the area around the root collar, especially on this high side, because the dirt line was all the way up to here, and when we excavated, this dirt built up here, and we are in the process now of trying to determine the root density and how likely it is that this tree is going to be okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig in here, and as you can see, I've got some rooting here. But look at that. Here's your dead giveaway that things are not at the proper depth, because as you can see, look at here, this root is growing straight up. Now, what is wrong with this picture? Once again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say that that root doesn't have to be growing straight up. It needs to be growing out along this way. And the reason it's growing up is because this fill layer was above the collar, and in order for that root to grow, they push towards the sources of air, water, and nutrients, especially air and water. And as we can see, we did enough aeration to where we've got moisture in the soil. As you can see, it's holding together. That's a perfect amount of moisture right there. And the root is growing straight up. And as I dig into this more, I don't want to dig into it a whole lot, but you can see where these roots, here's another major root, and there's nothing else around here that this could be coming from except this hickory tree. And so what we're going to do is gradually pull this dirt back. We're going to level this out so that the sides aren't so steep, and this collar will stay clearer longer. You're probably going to have to go back in every couple of years to do that. It's been 6 months since we were back here at this site. It's the middle of the winter, it's the middle of a drought, but it looks like, because of our aeration and because of our actions, that this tree is going to survive just fine with continued processing of the tree preservation actions. Aeration decompaction has been completed. We're going to put down some more topsoil. As soon as that's settled in, we'll be able to come back in and incorporate. We'll do some pruning, we'll do some additional feeding, and as the owner has resources in the budget to do it, we'll straighten all this out, and the tree will be a great survivor to thrive long term. All of our actions taken so far The root collar excavation and the aeration and decompaction using the hub and spoke pattern, especially since this being on grade, the circular array that we incorporated in here has helped this tree retain moisture, has encouraged additional root growth. Not a lot, but some, at least it's not going backward, and we have dried and stabilized the collar of the tree, and this tree is in better shape and is less of a risk and is closer to being a cheap to keep tree than it was when we started. And so at the point we are in this process, there's additional work to be done, but at this point this tree is on target, it is on schedule, and it is going to survive to thrive and become a cheap to keep tree in this man's landscape.